Life after the military can sneak up on you. You're trying to be a solid dad and husband, trying to keep things steady at work, trying to handle the bills at home, and at the same time, you're carrying years of stuff that you never really got to deal with. You might have had a rough childhood, or maybe the stress from your military service, uh, maybe the hits that you took in your marriages or relationships. And after enough of these losses or enough late nights staring at the ceiling, those dark thoughts about just checking out start to show up more and more. And eventually, unfortunately, they might start to feel normal. That's where our guest today, Brandon Held, lived for a long time. He grew up around chaos, served in the Air Force and the Army. He fought through multiple divorces, lost day-to-day life with his kids, and he got crushed by job loss and debt in his mid-40s. And for years, whenever life got really hard, his mind went straight to suicide as the way out. In this conversation, we're going to talk about that headspace that he found himself in, that a lot of people find themselves in, and what it's like to close that chapter in your life, and what it actually looks like to pull yourself back and build a life that feels like it's worth staying for. If you've ever had those thoughts and felt ashamed or alone, this one is meant to show you that you can get through the other side of that darkness. Before we get into this episode, though, I want to take a moment to raise awareness for something that's deeply important to our community, the Global War on Terrorism Memorial Foundation. This organization is working to build a permanent national memorial in Washington, D.C., to honor the service members, families, and civilians who were impacted by the global war on terrorism. This memorial will serve as both a tribute to those who served and as a way to ensure that their sacrifices are recognized and remembered for generations to come. If you'd like to learn more or find out how you can support their mission, visit gwatmemorialfoundation.org. Now let's get into today's episode. Hey, Brandon, welcome to the show. Glad to have you here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell us a little bit about yourself, kind of your background and maybe some military history, things like that, just for the listeners who maybe aren't familiar with you and who you are. I know you have, a podcast, so there might be some folks out there who've listened to your podcast and know a little bit about you, but for the folks who maybe have just discovered your podcast through this episode, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, I mean, to try to wrap up a long story short in a brief segment, I'm 52 years old. I was in the Air Force for 4 years. I was in the Army for 4 years, done a lot of stuff in between that, from aerospace to personal training to bartending to, many other things. And, I have a bachelor's degree in communications and a master's degree in business administration. And I've struggled with mental health and stuff in my life. And I wanted to help others who were going through those kinds of things, because when I was really struggling, I didn't feel like I had someone there for me or anywhere to turn or anyone to go to. And so really the idea behind my show is to be that for those people.
And that's a incredible way to do it too, because you get some people who very likely they're just kind of isolating. They're kind of off on their own by themselves. Maybe, yeah, sure, they might be listening to some podcasts. They might be, connecting with the world, the outside world that way, but not really getting out and really knowing that there are actual people out there who have gone through these same things. And when you share your story, and I'm sure we'll get more into your story in a bit here, but when you share your story and other people's stories, it kind of starts to get people feeling like, well, crap, it's not just me who's feeling this way. There's other people, and what do they do to get out of this mess? And that's kind of like the idea behind this show too, is that there are, we understand there are people out there who are going through hell right now. They're going through, maybe they experience a trauma or some other difficult time in their life, and they can get past that. It's just a matter of just sometimes just knowing that you're not alone and that there's somebody else out there who can help, right? And so yeah, let's get into kind of your show and your journey, a little bit about all that stuff. You mentioned you were in the Air Force and in the Army. What caused you to switch between the two?
Well, so I joined the Air Force at 17 years old, straight out of high school. I graduated high school half a year early. I joined the Air Force 2 weeks later. Like I wasn't playing around. I grew up, in a poor household, poor circumstances, and I knew the only way for me to do anything in life was get the hell out of there, basically.
Sure.
So I knew right away I was going to join the Air Force. And so by the time my high school class was walking for graduation, I had already finished my Air Force boot camp, my tech school, and I was at my first duty station while everyone else was just graduating high school. So, and I thought that was going to be my career. It didn't work out that way. Something, negative happened to me through no fault of my own while I was in the Air Force. I got screwed over by a master sergeant. So he made me kind of rethink my path in life. So I decided to get out when my 4 years was up because of that reason. Then I went to college and I got that mass communications slash broadcasting degree, and I wanted to do play by play for sports. And I got turned off of that by that community, that world. So then I was kind of lost there for a little bit, trying to figure out what am I going to do with myself. I considered going back into the Air Force again as an officer, but that didn't work out. So I decided I wanted to get a master's degree and I wanted to get it paid for. And that's how I ended up in the Army because, the Army pays 100% up to a certain dollar amount, which I kind of learned after the fact, but doesn't really matter. I was able to join the Army and get my MBA while I was in the Army. And so that's how that course went.
Cool. Yeah, and a lot of people have their various reasons for joining the military. In the beginning, it seemed like just trying to get yourself out of a bad situation, and then later on, it was for college. I don't think there's any right or wrong reason for joining the military, and in your case, there's several reasons for joining the military, and it's just interesting to see how people's journeys throughout their life have kind of taken them to one direction or another, and what their reasons were for joining. It's kind of cool to see the uh, different paths that people take, right? Um, so your military experience, coming from, you said, kind of a difficult background, challenging, environment that you kind of lived in, growing up.
Yeah.
How did your military experience change your perspective on the world, on life, on things that were going on around you, or did it? Maybe it didn't at all. But I would imagine a lot of times military changes some folks, and did that happen for you? Did it change you for the better, or what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I have often said, and I shout it from the rooftops, that for me, in my situation, in my circumstances, joining the Air Force was the smartest and best thing I ever did for myself in my life. Because if had I not done that, I was a terrible student in high school. I was like a 1.5 GPA student. The thought of going to college was, this thing that would never happen to me in my life at that time. That was the way I viewed my intelligence in the world. And joining the Air Force gave me so much confidence and control of myself and what I was capable of. It made me mature a lot, of course. I was 17 at the time. And it really just gave me so many base foundations of who I am and who I've become throughout my life, just being, honorable and having integrity and just a good person that, would want to help people that are in distress or anything like that. It really just in a lot of ways shaped the man that I became. I was in the Air Force. I took a college class in an attempt to help myself in promotions. But taking that college class showed me that I actually could go to college. I just, I learned how to apply myself. I learned how to do what it took. That wasn't my thought process taking that. When I took that college class, I was just trying to get promoted. I was just trying to use it as a, hey, I'm taking college classes, promote me, right? But it really reshaped what I thought I was capable of and could do, along with a lot of the things that the military pushes you to make you understand the depths of what you're capable of that most people in their life would never push themselves like that to see what they're capable of. So it was in a great way life changing.
Yeah, and sometimes, people who graduate high school, 17, 18 years old, whatever, and they maybe just aren't ready for college, and like
Yeah.
in your case, like there's probably some maturing that needed to take place, and maybe even although you did finish high school early, which was, not a ton of people get to say that they do that, but sometimes you just need maybe a couple of years just to figure out what do I want to be when I grow up? What do I want to do, and how do I get there? And what do I need to do? And and like what you were saying with the Air Force, it gave you that confidence to say, I can do things.
Yeah.
I'm not this, 1.5 or whatever you said GPA. I'm not that student. I'm way better than that. And then you go in and do it, and you go through and get an MBA too. Like that probably wasn't even on the radar at 17 years old, right?
Not at all. And what's funny about that is, you get taught to believe certain things. And, when I was growing up, education wasn't important in my family. It wasn't something that was, you know, you need to do this to be successful in life, right? Like I
Right.
came from, we were just scraping to get by every day in life, right? So, and I dealt with fighting, my mom and my stepdad fighting. My stepdad would physically beat up my mom. They would throw parties on weeknights. Like there was just no real solid parenting going on. So part of the reason that I wasn't a good student was studies were not promoted as something I needed to concern myself with. And B, a lot of days I would go to school just tired as hell because I was kept up till midnight, 1, 2 a.m. from, bad parenting. And I'm not here to crap on my mom, but she had me at 16, so she was still young. She was still
Sure.
growing up while I was growing up. So that was just the situation and the circumstances I was in. And yeah, I was super immature when I joined, and in leaving high school a semester early it wasn't because I did anything great. It was just simply, you go talk to the guidance counselor and you say, look, this is my path, this is my trajectory. I'm joining the Air Force. And they say, all right, cool, check the box. You can graduate high school and leave. So it wasn't because I did anything successful. I just convinced them that it was worthwhile to let me leave early.
Well, you successfully convinced them. We'll give you that much credit
Yeah,
anyways.
yeah,
But yeah, even we were talking before about how, some 17, 18-year-olds are maybe just not ready for college. And then you're talking about like your situation with your mom having you at 16. Some people at 16 aren't ready to have kids, and that's a
yeah,
huge responsibility. It's probably even bigger than, or not probably, it's bigger than college, bigger than careers and all that kind of stuff. You're literally raising a person and responsible for this person's life, and to hand that over to a 16-year-old. I mean, I have a 16-year-old son right now, and to think that if he had a kid right now, it would be like I don't think he'd be able
well,
to handle
let
a
me
kid.
add to that. I was born when she was 16. 2
Okay.
days after her 18th birthday, she had my sister. So at
Okay.
18, she had 2 children already.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's a lot of responsibility to throw at a young kid,
Yeah,
at that stage in life when, I mean, we've all been that age before. I was young and dumb. I know I did some stupid things back then, and,
sure.
no, thank God there weren't cameras and social media the way there is today, but,
Yeah.
like back then, it just, you know, you do a lot of crazy things, and so it's not surprising when you said, growing up there was parties and all that kind of stuff, because that's just what people of that age tend to do, and so it wasn't like it was an abnormal thing. It was just that was just where the priority was. So,
No, and my stepdad is a biker, so,
mhm,
was a biker. He's passed now. He's the father of my younger brother. It is what you imagine, if you're not part of a biker gang or you don't know you're not in that world, it is exactly what you think it is. So,
sure,
there's no such thing as a Friday or Saturday, then their life is that. So, doesn't
sure.
matter to them.
So you mentioned earlier that you also kind of struggle with some mental health related issues. Talk to us a little bit about that. Was that kind of stemming from military service, from stuff from early on, combination of things? Like where did that all come from, and how did that all play out?
That's a good question. I don't really have a specific answer for that. What I can say is, I grew up under pretty bad circumstances, but I always had this thing in my brain that when I turn 17 and I go live on my own, like none of that matters, right? I'm going to make my own life, and my life's destiny is in my hands. And then I don't know, the first like really bad breaking point I ever hit as an adult, I'd never felt this way before. Suicide entered my mind, like suicidal ideation entered my mind, like, oh, this pain sucks so much that it would just be so much better if I wasn't here. Right.
Mm,
Like, if I die, this pain goes away, all my problems go away, blah, blah, blah. Right. So you get that first thought in your head about how that can solve your problems. And then you work your way through it or whatever. And then I just kind of lived a life from, almost 18 until my mid 40s, where if things got really bad, that's where my head went. I just
yeah,
thought about, well, maybe I should just kill myself and end it all. And then this will solve my problems. And ultimately, you don't, because you understand that it hurts the people that love you and care about you. And, it might solve your problem, but it may create more problems, especially as I have 3 sons now. So, I would think about, well, if I killed myself, then yeah, my worry is over, but who knows what kind of trauma and tragedy I'm putting on to my sons. And so one time I did attempt to kill myself in my mid 40s, and it was kind of accidental. I know that sounds weird, but basically what I did is I was having those suicidal ideation thoughts. I was on my third divorce. It's a divorce I didn't want. I lost being a father to my kids every day, which was heartbreaking for me in a way that I could never really truly describe. I got laid off from my career at the exact same time while I was going through this divorce. And then a judge ordered me to have to pay child support and spousal maintenance, even though I was given 50-50 custody. So, I saw myself at that point. I lost my family. I was, 20 something K in the hole. Like, just from the jump, like, even when I get a job or whatever, I have to go pay this spousal maintenance and child support and all this stuff before I even break even, before I get back to 0 again, right? And I'm in my mid 40s. And so, yeah, mentally, and I felt ready to give up. And so I have sleep apnea and insomnia, and I took an Ambien before I went to bed. And then somewhere after I took that one Ambien, I woke up in the night and I downed the rest of the bottle. And so after that happened, someone actually saved my life. Someone expected me to be somewhere the next morning. I didn't show up. She called an ambulance and she saved my life. After that happened, I thought, I can't keep living like this. If I'm going to live, I have to do something differently because, I need to live the best life I can live. Like, I can't keep doing this up and down, potentially wanting to commit suicide stuff. And so I just kind of made a choice right on the spot. Like, this is not going to be my life anymore. and I'm going to start doing the things that I need to do to make sure that this isn't my life anymore. And so I took those steps and I did those things and I got through to the other side and I'm genuinely living my best life. And when I got to that point, which, was a couple years ago, I thought, man, this is really great. And I would tell other people about what I had gone through, and they would be like, you really need to write a book on your life story, right? It's pretty unique, it's pretty phenomenal. And I was like, nah, I'm not really a writer, but what I could do is start a podcast because I would like to show people that if they're going through what I was going through, not only can you get through it, you can be even better than you've ever been in your entire life. So that's basically what took me from there to how I got here.
And I think from a lot of people that I've talked to, the a common thread that people have is that they come to a decision like you did, that this is just not going to be the way I'm going to live my life anymore. I'm not going to let these intrusive thoughts come in and start just beating me down and saying, "Hey, just give up and just quit and whatever." Like, you just have this moment, this revelation kind of moment where it just is like, "No, that's done. That's behind me now, and I'm just gonna move on and focus on the good things and make a better life."
Yeah.
And then they do. It's funny, like, when you the things that you focus on become the things that you get more of. And when you focus on the good things, you focus on the positives. And yeah, sure, positive thinking isn't going to erase 20K in debt
Yeah.
right overnight,
Yeah.
but it will it'll make that journey a little bit easier. It's never easy to have to go pay off that kind of debt. But then if you if if you're doing it while depressed and pissed off and agitated and all these negative emotions, it's not going to really help anything either. So you might as well kind of just change how your outlook is. I know that's easier said than done,
Right.
and in your case it took that kind of rock bottom moment to get there. I'm not saying that everyone needs to get to that low of a level that they're deciding to hurt themselves, and hopefully nobody does that. That's not my intention of saying any of that, but at some point you do have to just make that decision and say, nope, I'm done, right?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times it's really just you creating your own mindset. And like you just said, I know that sounds easier said than done, and it isn't something you just do overnight. You don't just go from one way of thinking to bam, I decide I'm not going to think like that anymore and flip a switch. No, it's a process for sure. And you still go through your struggles, but then you make a decision during those times. All right, I'm not going to think like this or focus on this. I'm going to think like this and focus on this. And it really is the gratitude and the positive mindset that makes a difference. And in the beginning, it's a hard thing that you have to kind of force yourself to do. But then over time, it becomes natural, it becomes instinctive, and it's just becomes the way you just handle situations
Yeah.
now. And that's the part that I really hope people can gravitate to and understand that nothing changes overnight. It is hard work and you have to put in the work, but once you do it, man, does it pay off.
It does. And I think any habit that you form is going to be hard to change. Just you're not going to change them immediately. It's going
Right.
to take some time. And if
No,
your
I was doing
habit
that for
is
like 30 years, right?
right,
So
right,
I had to
yeah,
overcome 30 years of thought process.
right. And so that was your habit that you got into, just
Yeah.
thinking that way, thinking all those negative thoughts, and the longer you do it, the harder it is to break. It's not to say that you can't break that habit, but it just gets harder the longer you wait. So, the best time to start was yesterday. The second best time to start is today. And
Yeah.
and I think, that's just, again, that's a decision that someone has to make and say, you know what? today's going to be the day. I'm going to do the work, and I'm going to, really try to change the way my outlook is, or the way I'm thinking about things. And
I think the important part is to allow yourself some grace, right? Nobody's perfect. Nobody
sure,
makes a, I use this rule in anything in life, even if it comes to, I like to lift weights and eat, a certain type of way. But some days I'm not feeling it and I cheat, right? So that doesn't mean I just give up on my dietary restrictions and the way I try to eat and say, well, I screwed it up. So forget it. It's over.
right,
You have to allow yourself some grace. This is the same situation. Okay. Maybe one night it didn't go like you wanted it to emotionally. You really gave in to your old ways of thinking. That doesn't just mean you quit and say you can't do it. You give yourself some grace to say, all right, I screwed that night up, but I'm going to be better next time.
right. And like anything, you're going to have good days and bad days of anything. You have good days of work, you have bad days at work. You have, good days in your relationship, you have some bad days in your relationships. And you're going to have good days and bad days on this journey as well. And our emotions will fluctuate depending on what's going on in life, what's happened to you that day. And that's normal. I mean, you're a human, so you're going to experience that at some point. You're going to have those highs and lows in your emotions, and that's fine. That you're supposed to. So don't think just, oh well, today was a rough day. I was having a bad day. I was just really feeling down. Well, okay, well, tomorrow's another day. It's
Yeah,
that's
I really can't think of much in life where you don't have some highs and lows, right?
right.
And you have, whether it's your relationships, your job, your kids, what, I don't care really what it is you're talking about. You have the control to decide just how low it goes. That's something I struggled with and didn't know how to get through. And it sucks because I have a brother that's 10 years younger and he hasn't gone, he hasn't done the steps like I have to make the emotional and mental change. And I watch him and I listen to him and he's still on that other side.
Mm,
And I try to guide him as a older brother, but he's 42, I'm 52, he's still his own man. And it sucks because I hear him in that negative space and I hear him taking things that, could be here, but he's making them up here in as far as, tragic and difficult and all that. And when I see people go through that, I think, man, I used to be like that too. And I want to help people get out of that space. And I want to
sure.
help people understand, you really have control to keep it down here. And that's one of the main things I want to do because when people attempt suicide or even just think about it, but mostly attempt and are successful, um, it really breaks my heart. It breaks my heart because that I just know that most likely that person's life wasn't awful, but they were in an awful moment. And now because of that awful moment in time, the rest of their life is done. And that's so
Mhm.
tragic to me.
Yeah, it is. And there's even been some people who have attempted and failed, like jumping from a bridge or something like that, and they survived the fall, and those types of things. And they were interviewed after the fact, and almost every single instance, they said basically as soon as their feet left that bridge, they regretted that decision. They
Yeah.
didn't want to. They wish they could take that back, but at that point, gravity's taken over, and there's nothing really that you can do about that except for hope that the impact doesn't kill you. And so think about how many people that were successful in committing suicide, that as they were, whatever it was that they were doing, were thinking to themselves, "Man, I wish I didn't do that." Now, granted, it's not every single person, but good percentage of them were, like you said, just going through a real tough time right now, but it doesn't mean that their whole life was terrible, that they have to throw
Yeah.
away the rest of the however many years they have left. Like, you don't
Yeah.
have to throw that all away for one situation that you're going through right now. That's tough, you know?
Yeah, I mean, there's a story of this girl. I don't know if you read or saw this, but she was someone who she liked to jump out of planes and skydive. And do you know this story?
I'm
Um,
not sure that I do, no.
no, this is fairly recent, within the last few, I don't know, 3, 4 months ago.
Okay.
Um, she, went up in the plane one day, like everything was normal. She got up there like, "Hey, just another day, I'm gonna skydive," and then she jumped out of the plane, and then she intentionally disabled her gear so she could fly to the ground and die. And then it wasn't until after the fact that everyone found out her boyfriend had just broken up with her the night before, and to me, that is so tragic. Like, she really so strongly believed that her life wasn't worth living without her boyfriend in that moment, that there's no other choice anymore but for her to be gone. And that is so sad and so tragic because, as we all know, we've all gone through heartaches and heartbreaks, and we survived and we moved on, right? And sometimes even learned that we're better for it. We're better off because of that situation.
Right.
And that's the part that I want to get to people, so they understand that in that moment, however dark and deep it feels, it's just a moment. It will pass, and it can get better. It will get better for sure, but you are a big determining factor on just how much better it gets.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. And I think especially with this audience, mostly veterans or military folks who are listening to this, we've all done something difficult, even if it's just basic training
Yeah,
level of things. Where
yeah.
like there's been some people I've talked to that are like, oh no, basic training was easy, and it was a piece of cake and everything. It's like, okay, whatever, tough guy.
How
It's
true that is for
I
anyone, but
yeah, I know, right? Exactly. So, and if that's you, fine, whatever. It very well may have been. I don't know. I'm not you, so I'm not going to sit here and judge or whatever. It wasn't the easiest thing for me. I know that, but you got through that, right?
yeah,
And in that moment, in that suck when your muscles are burning, when you're sleep deprived, you're starving, like you're hungry, you're cold, you're just miserable all around. You got through it,
yeah.
and
It
you got
ended.
to it ended, and you got to graduation day, and that day probably felt pretty good. That
Yeah,
that phase of life, that suck was over, and you get to now move on to go do something else that's bigger and better than you would have been able to do just a couple months earlier before you started basic training. You wouldn't have been able to go off and do the job that you did in the military without going through the training that you did. So that transformed you into something different. And so when you're going through any sort of tough time, and I'm using basic training because it's kind of a universal thing amongst this audience that we kind of understand that it's difficult, like, varying degrees for each people, who or each person who's gone through basic training or whatever, but we got it. It's hard, but we got through it, and with that, whatever it might be, a divorce, a death of a loved one, even if it's just like a period of life where you're just depressed for one reason or another, and it may not be related to any of those kind of things. It's just a period of time, and you'll get through it at some point, and when you do, you'll look back on it and say, "Okay, I've transformed, I've changed, I'm a better person," like yourself, right? You have become this better version of yourself, and you have a different outlook on life, and things are just looking up. They're better. Like you said, you're living your best life, and you wouldn't be here talking about that if you were successful, right?
yeah. Yeah, I mean, and to further advance your point about difficulty turning into pride, people would always ask me, what's the difference between the Air Force and Army? Mainly more like which one is better, right? And I would always tell people, like, you know what? The Air Force was easier. They have more money. It's a better lifestyle if you're just talking about quality of life and all those things. And if, most people, I would recommend, if you can get in the Air Force, join the Air Force. That's where that's what I would recommend to do. But I also knew how hard it was to be a soldier in the army. So when I wore my army uniform, I had more pride than I
Mm,
had when I wore my Air Force uniform. And that's not to crap on anyone in the Air Force because I respect all veterans and everyone currently serving our country because that's a decision we all make to do, and I respect anyone that makes a decision to do that for whatever reason, like you said before. uh but I just had more pride wearing my army uniform because I knew how hard it was to be a soldier.
yeah. Eh, that's well said because you do have a sense of pride when you accomplish that hard thing, and it doesn't matter what that hard thing is. It could be a problem that you're trying to solve at home or at work, or it could be troubles in your relationship, or it could be a lot of different things. But after you've gone through that hard thing and you figured it out, and you can look back on it and be like, I'm glad that I stuck through it, and
Yeah,
like I can see how I'm better off now. And for those folks who are in that season of life right now where they're going through this tough time, you have survived 100% of your bad days up until today.
that's right.
I mean, all you got to do is make it to tonight, go to bed, wake up tomorrow, and you've survived another one. And hopefully over time those days get better, and that you have fewer of those bad days. But you survived 100% of them so far. I don't care how bad it's been. If you're here and you're listening to this, you've survived them all, so you can do it. Like, think about how hard that was. You can do it, and you can do it again.
I think one of the main things people should understand is if you have the strength and ability and it's within your power to do something differently that will make your life better or make your circumstances better, then do that. That's to me is one of the most empowering things I think people miss out on, right? I grew up poor. I thought being in the military was going to be my life, enlisted, right? So not really any thought of having any kind of financial success in life, but just getting by, just doing enough to make ends meet and support a family. I was trying to break generational curses like alcoholism and abusiveness, and so those were my focuses. So the focus of ever becoming financially independent or anything like that was way beyond my reach at that time in life. But as I got older and realized if I made decisions to make changes with my life can be better. And for that reason, that's how I ended up with the MBA, slowly but surely got there. I was 33 when I graduated with an MBA. And even that time I was a full-time soldier, a full-time MBA student. It was a really, really hard time in my life, and I had to keep convincing myself this was worth it, right? This
Yeah.
was going to be worth it. This was going to pay off. And it did. And when I got through that, and it opened doors to get me into things and do places that I otherwise would have never been able to get into. That's the thing I want people to understand. If you have the ability to make a decision to make your circumstances different, then do it.
Yeah. And and going through that, being a full-time army soldier, being a full-time MBA student, and going through that difficult time must have made that MBA, when you finally achieve that level, must have made that feel even better
Oh, I couldn't
than
shut up about it. People are always like, "Oh, you
you're
gotta
still
tell
talking
everyone
about it,
you
come
have
on.
an MBA." And I'm like, "You know what? If you went through what I went through to get this
Right.
MBA, you wouldn't shut up about it either." And
Yeah.
so I didn't shut up about it for a long time. Probably for like the first 2 years I had it, I would spit it out every
Sure.
opportunity I had because I knew what it took for me to get there. Not just the 4 years as a an army soldier doing the MBA program, but also just where I started from in
That's
life.
right. Yeah. And you rightfully so. You should be able to, you know, be proud about that and brag about it, and say, "Hey, look what I did. Look what I accomplished." Because I mean, it's not a small feat to go through and do that for folks who, aren't familiar with it. It's not an easy process, and being a
Yeah, and the
soldier
idea was,
and
if
doing
I
that.
can do it, you can do it, right?
Yeah,
Anyone can do
exactly.
it. It just takes the put the nose to the grindstone effort to do it. I'm not exceptionally intelligent or anything. I feel like I'm an intelligent person because I've acquired knowledge and intelligence over time in my life. But I wasn't born like this whiz kid or anything
Right.
like that. I had to work hard to get there. And so if I can do it, anyone can do it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned your podcast just briefly earlier in the conversation, but the Life is Crazy podcast. Tell us about that show and kinda the you told us a little bit about the inspiration behind it and kinda what your goals are with that, but, just, let's tell us a little bit about that show and how, how it's how you see it helping folks.
Yeah, I mean, I don't get a lot of feedback on it, so that what I would say is the downfall, or not the downfall, but the downside of it. I put the show together in a hope to have something. Like you said, we live in a virtual world now. People are barely face to face anymore, and I wanted something to be out there for people to go to understand. Like, I'm in this place, who can I identify with me? Who can I identify with? So I make sure that I have guests on, outside of a rare few exceptions, because they're doctors who are in the field of psychiatry or something like that, but still not even the case for them, that they went from rock bottom to get to where they are today. Maybe they were
Mm.
suicidal, maybe they've attempted suicide. Maybe they, whatever they went through, they were in a really bad place themselves. And now they're living their best life or a great life. And that really is a requirement to be a guest on my show, because that's the message we're sending. And it doesn't do me any good to bring someone on the show that has lived this phenomenal life. And oh, by the way, now they're successful, doing well. Who's that helping? That's not helping anyone. So I really do. I don't even want to say try. I really do bring people on that have lived through it, and they walk the walk and talk the talk, and now they're trying to do what I'm doing, which is trying to help people get through those same circumstances. And the more diverse that can be, and the more different types of people that I get on there that have gone through those things, whether black, white, Asian, male, female, it doesn't matter. Hopefully that'll connect with and speak to someone, and that's really what I'm trying to do.
Yeah, and again, that way of sharing a story can really help somebody who's sitting there thinking to themselves, this is just me. I'm the one who's screwed up. I'm the one who has all these problems.
Exactly. Yeah.
I'm the problem, maybe even.
Yeah.
And when they start hearing other people having very similar stories and maybe nobody has the same story. So you're not going to listen to your show and hear your exact story coming out of somebody. We're all different and
Well,
that's fine.
yeah,
But
they're all different. I'm on 80 something episodes at this point. I've recorded over 100. Every
yeah,
story's different. Every
right.
story's different.
Yeah, they're all going to be different. But there's similarities. There's enough similarities there that like someone who's listening to your story that you just talked about today, they might have had something similar happening with them, or they might be in a very similar season of life that you were talking about that you were in, and they might say, okay, this is what I need to do. This is kind of the roadmap for me to get out of this crappy situation that I'm finding myself in, and maybe they give that a shot and it works and it gets them moving to a better, happier, more fulfilling life, and without having heard a story like yours or the ones that you share on your show, they may not realize that, hey, there is something better for me out there, and I'm not alone.
Yeah, and I wanna make it clear to people, like, in a perfect world, I would be able to, at a minimum, break even doing this podcast, but even better, be able, to make money doing it so I could devote my time and my life to it. But Where it stands now, I work Monday through Friday contracting for the government type of job, and I pay money to do this. This is out of my pocket cost to help people, and I don't mind doing that, but I want people to understand that this is something that I'm passionate about and I want to help people. And I tell everyone that, ever asks me, more important to me than someone giving me money is someone coming to me and saying, you know what, I listened to your podcast and it saved my life. I've never heard that. I'm hoping that that's happening, but that's really what I want to hear.
Yeah, same as far as the costs go, as far
Yeah.
as the financial side of the show, and, I'm a little further along than you are as far as, like, number of episodes and all that kinda stuff, but, same thing. You don't always hear those messages from folks, but on occasion, you'll get a message from somebody and saying they won't necessarily come right out and say, "Hey, this episode saved my life," or something like that, but they might just say something like, "Hey, I really needed to hear that today. I needed to hear that message,"
Yeah.
and when you get a message like that, it's like, okay, this is working. This is doing some good. And just like all that hard stuff that we were talking about earlier, like running a podcast like this is not the easiest thing to do, especially with a full-time job and family commitments and other things that you have going on. It's really not the easiest thing. And it's not cheap either to do.
No,
Um,
it's definitely not.
and and so, you end up doing it, and when you do hear those types of messages from somebody, or even they leave a review for the podcast, and it's 5 stars, and, "Hey, this was a great show, great conversation," whatever. It feels good. Like, you can feel proud that you have accomplished something good, and I thought from the day 1 of this podcast, if I could help just one person, then this show is gonna be a success, because if that person is still here tomorrow and they get to wake up tomorrow and their family still has them around, then mission accomplished. And,
Yeah, I
you
mean,
know
that is so invaluable, it's I'm sure you've probably heard this analogy, but, if I were to ask you, "Would you want $10,000,000? Would you take it?" And then you'll say, "Hell yeah, I would take
Yeah,
it."
of course.
And then I'd say, "Okay, well, if I were to ask you, if you want $10,000,000, but tomorrow morning you die, you don't get to wake up, would you take it?" No.
No,
So
no,
live
obviously.
every day like your life is worth more than $10,000,000, right? So if
Right.
you think about the fact that if you just saved one person's life, that's invaluable. Like you can't put a value on how much that's worth.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. Because that person's everybody, I don't care who that person is, that person's life is priceless. And so even that $10,000,000 number, I mean, that could been 100,000,000. It could been,
Right.
a
Exactly.
billion. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter what the
Imagine.
number is.
I mean, you could probably put a number on there where I would say yes, just because I have three sons, and you know, if I could take care of grandkids from now on, I mean, okay, my life is worth that. But that's in jest, of course. But like you, I really wanted to reach veterans. That was my
Yeah.
first thought process when I went through this, because we all know how many veterans commit suicide a day.
Yeah.
And, that's so sad to me, making a choice to serve this country and do the tough things that we did when we served
Yeah.
and go through the things that we do when we served, which, by the way, I don't know if people are watching this Marines documentary on Netflix, but that's a pretty freaking great show about how what Marines go through in a life as a Marine. So there's a lot that veterans sacrifice in their time in service, and they deserve everything. And for a veteran to commit suicide and give up, it's tragic to me, and
It
that's
is.
not something I want to see happen.
No, absolutely not. Before we wrap up, any last things that you might want to mention to folks? Any maybe words of advice, other places that they can go and find out more about you and the type of stuff that you have out there, or anything like that.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So I have my website, brandonheld.com. And when you get to brandonheld.com, on the very first page, there's multiple things you can do. The first thing you can do is, if you want to support the podcast, you can subscribe to the podcast. But right down below that, you have access to my Life is Crazy podcast. It's a link that takes you to it, or you have a link that takes you to YouTube for anyone that likes college football. I also do an Ohio State football YouTube show. It's called the Buckeye Battle Cry Show. I just started it back in August, but it's doing really well. I mean, Grant, I just started the Life is Crazy podcast back in April. So it's all pretty new for me, but they're both doing fairly well considering how new they are. And I'm very thankful for that. Uh, so if you're into those things and you like those things, or you know someone who might be, please check those out. And then, just as far as my final nugget goes, we've already talked about this, but I feel like for people like that, it's the most important thing to understand. And that is, whatever you're going through, it's a moment in time, and it will pass, and it will get better. And that, to me, is the thing people need to remember more than anything else when they're going through something. Because I know when you're in that moment, you can feel like, oh my God, this is my life. I don't want to live this life. But it isn't your life. It's just a moment in your life.
That's right.
And so remember that, and fight through that moment, and work to live the best life you can live. And you will live the best life you can live.
Absolutely. I think that's a great place to end it. So, Brandon, thanks so much for coming on and sharing your journey, your inspiration, your path with all of us. And for folks who want to check out the podcast, Brandon's podcast, there, the Life is Crazy podcast, I will have links to all that in the show notes, so you can check it out there. Brandon, thanks again.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.